Hello, this is Mr. Ferreira, and I'm going to talk you through the evaluation of the evolutionary model for partner preference. And it's going to be a number of kind of points, starting with research support, some additional ideas that you could use both in knowledge and in evaluation, and kind of round up this kind of whole topic for you. So first of all, the research support will obviously come in terms of bus. Okay, bus was named in the knowledge section of this, but we can find that specifically it can relate to acidity. That's this process where kind of things kind of develop in a particular way in order to kind of make it appropriate for the evolutionary kind of process. And so what can we say? It said that women place greater value on resource-related characteristics and men valued reproductive characteristics. So in other words, the things that are important for men to develop in terms of kind of characteristics that kind of show resources, they develop, and kind of men, so women develop kind of the characteristics that are kind of due for reproductive, kind of wide hips, large breasts, those types of ideas, men being strength, kind of characteristics in that. So of course what we can say in terms of the bus, we can use obviously a lot more detail from the knowledge section, is that these differences reflect sex differences due to acidity. Okay, and of course they support our predictions as to what people would prefer. Therefore, obviously we can see kind of like the preferences that women were looking for resources, men were looking for sex, and we see in kind of like the choices that they particularly make. Now, the reason why we like to use bus, it says here, of course, it's a range of cultures over 37 countries. And so it could be that this is a fundamental human preference. This is actually talking about human nature and not dependent on cultural influences. Now, obviously bus is important. I don't want to kind of downplay the importance of bus. So you're either using it in your knowledge or you're using it in your evaluation. However, there's quite an interesting study that you might want to also consider. And this is a study by Penton Voke, and it came up in your biopsychology course. Okay, so it says there, suggests that female mate choice varies across the menstrual cycle. Now, the key to this particular thing is that, of course, you cannot control the hormones through those particular menstrual cycles. But what we're finding is partner preferences change according to those different hormones. Now, of course, I can't see much of a difference between these two faces. We have perhaps the more square jaw as opposed to the more rounded face, one being more masculine, one being more feminine. So it says here, women found to choose a slightly feminized version of the male face in terms of long-term attractiveness. So which partner do they want to have a long-term relationship with? They want to have the rounded kind of caring face. Remember, this is actually the same person. They've just kind of photoshopped the face. And so they want somebody who will care for them and care for their offspring. However, what we find is that when they were looking basically for short-term sexual relationships, they chose a face that was more masculine. Okay, so therefore, its sexual selection may favor females who pursue a mixed mating strategy. So in other words, it could be that, okay, so I kind of want to have a long-term relationship with kind of the caring kind of person, but I want to have sex with somebody who can provide offspring. That is kind of the manly kind of idea. So I kind of explain this kind of here. So choose for partner, I'm going to go for the feminized appearance, okay, but for somebody to kind of basically have sex with, I want to have the masculine kind of appearance. And what Penton Voke was kind of showing is that this was the same face, and so yet, however, the more masculine kind of version of the face was kind of preferred during kind of that aspect of the menstrual cycle when they were most likely to fall pregnant. And of course, that masculine aspect is kind of goes with this idea that testosterone, for example, should have actually been kind of a negative thing that should have kind of harmed the male, but they're able to survive. So therefore, they must have something which is kind of important to kind of pass on to the next kind of generation. So if they're healthy, it says here, they have a high efficient immune system, so variable value characteristic to your offspring. So please perhaps go back to your Penton Vogue notes and kind of look at this, and certainly it's something which can be chosen in this particular context. And this will link to some of the content analysis that we did back in the research methods when we looked at the kind of the personal ads where people were kind of advertising kind of characteristics of themselves or what they preferred for in a partner. And we see here that women tend to list their physical characteristics in order to kind of attract the male, and the man potentially promotes their wealth and their attractiveness in that particular way. Now that's obviously quite a big idea, so get your head around this idea of using bus and Penton Vogue to kind of explain certain aspects of that. Now then, the next most important study probably that you need to look at is Clark and Hatfield, and basically looking at heterosexual relationships and choosiness. Okay, and this is something which I think I potentially mentioned within the lesson. Okay, and there's a link to the YouTube video where they kind of show the Clark and Hatfield study, kind of a modern version of that. Okay, the gist of this particular study is as forth. Okay, so they sent a male and a female student into the population, and basically with a line, and the line was, I have been noticing you around campus. I find you to be very attractive. Would you go to bed with me tonight? Okay. Now, of course, maybe you want to pause at this particular point and kind of think, okay, so what is going to be the difference between a male asking a female and a female asking a male? And I'm sure you won't be too shocked by the result. 75% of the male students agreed immediately to have sex with somebody that they did not know. However, there wasn't a single female student who agreed. Okay, so the reason this is research support for the evolutionary model, of course, is it says that females are choosier than male students, and this would kind of fit into this idea that women have to protect their ovum, protect who they potentially kind of have that kind of long kind of term, kind of looking after the baby, caring for the baby, to have to be choosy of who they have sex with, where the man is happy to kind of pretty much spread his seed to anyone who is willing to receive it. So some people have called this the investment model, but we see kind of idea that women are invested and therefore are a lot more choosy in a particular case. So then the third piece of research support that I have, or kind of limitation that I have, is that it ignores social and cultural influences. Now this might seem a little bit bizarre. Why would I have this directly in the same kind of context as kind of bus? Because I've kind of said bus is universal, so you've got to be careful that you don't kind of put this straight off to bus, because that's you just simply contradicting yourself. But this is kind of maybe a furthermore, or kind of adding on to the end of the essay and stuff like that. So there could well be some cultural aspects to this. So for example, we find in countries where women are denied economic and political power, they need to rely on security and economic resources. So therefore, there may well actually be a greater inclination. So let's think about it. There are some cultures where women aren't even allowed to drive, aren't allowed to have jobs without their husband's permission and stuff like that. And so therefore, it's kind of a good strategy potentially to find a partner who can rely for those types of things. And kind of why I'm kind of showing you this particular cartoon, because I do find it particularly interesting. Of course, there's two people from different cultures with different expectations. So kind of moving on from this, Kaiser and Sharma basically say that potential mate access to resources may be down to the woman's status and educational opportunity. So in other words, some of you who may come from a more kind of culturally demanding kind of background, where maybe expectation that you are expected to marry a certain type of person with a particular religion, particular kind of things like that, you might find that you relate a lot more to this. And I certainly have spoken to some parents who kind of by choosing to move to the United Kingdom and live in a more kind of liberal society, they accept that their daughters have to make different choices. But of course, that's because we live in a country where there's no expectation that as a woman you perhaps can or cannot do certain things. Kind of adding to this, that we also have a change in women's kind of roles within the workplace. And so, of course, women may no longer be kind of resource orientated in terms of this. So kind of feminism has actually changed kind of how people potentially kind of relate to your evolutionary kind of throwback about looking for resources. So it could be that we need to consider economic factors in terms of partner preferences. So it could be that actually it's down to potential kind of outcomes or cultural situational outcomes rather than kind of evolutionary outcomes. Now, just to kind of add a bit to our understanding of the evolutionary model, and I kind of proposed the Sexy Sons hypothesis. There's an alternative to this, and that's called the handicap hypothesis. I kind of indicated this in the introduction to the course, where we looked at Stuart Crouch, Crouchy, the footballer, who once kind of said that if he wasn't a footballer, he'd pretty much be sad and lonely. And of course, there's some kind of logic to this. It says that if a male has survived despite the handicap, there must be a true survivor. So if I'm incredibly tall, or if I'm kind of got this face that kind of is chiseled and kind of implied that my immune system is potentially having to fight testosterone all the time, it's that type of idea. And so that handicap becomes the preferred mate. And I have a picture there of a peacock, and Darwin apparently for years and years kind of absolutely hated peacocks because he couldn't understand kind of why they existed, because peacocks, when he studied them, kind of realized that they grow their tail every single year, and obviously growing that tail takes lots of energy. And so therefore that's quite draining on the peacock. We also find that potentially the peacock is a victim because they've got this bright coloured kind of tail that's heavy, difficult to fly and things like that, that genuinely speaking, that a peacock should not exist, because they should have all been eaten, and they should not exist. But of course, in terms of that handicap, it means that the peacocks that did survive must be cunning and strong and good. And actually, when we look at kind of studies, we find that actually the length of the tail is critical, and that the female peacocks will choose the longest tail kind of each time. And that kind of links to the handicap hypothesis. So there we go. We have kind of a couple of evaluation points. My recommendation is you kind of read through them. You kind of plan an essay, plan exactly what you would say. Certainly kind of consider terminology like discuss as opposed to outline and evaluate. Kind of how would you argue kind of partner preference based on these kind of studies. Thank you for listening. I hope it's been good, and you take care. Bye.